Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you back to the Women's Sexual Health Series. My name is Lauren Broshak. I'm one of the therapists here at Life with Cancer, specializing in sexual health. And I'm here with my colleague, Rebecca. If you'd like to quickly introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Rebecca DePatri, one of the oncology nurse navigators here at Peterson Life with Cancer, supporting sexual health programming for this series as well. So I appreciate you being here.
We are so excited to be back with you for the second session of the Women's Sexual Health Series. Before we get started, we did want to share a little bit of information about the Peterson Life with Cancer program. We first want to kick it off saying a big thank you to the Cancer Action Coalition of Virginia and the CDC for their grant awarded to support this program and allowing this to happen. A quick overview of what you'll be seeing in the series from now through June is today we're here with pelvic floor movement with yoga therapy with Sayde Alexandrescu, and we'll do an introduction to her here soon. We'll also be doing pelvic floor with physical therapy, mindfulness and sexual well-being, reinvigorating eroticism, an overview of women's sexual health, managing emotional distress, finding pleasure and introducing toys, treating sexual concerns, sexual adjustment for couples, and sexual desire. So we've got a lot of really amazing, exciting things here for you in the series. Life with Cancer is a part of the Innovashar Cancer System, providing education and psychosocial support for all individuals impacted by cancer, from diagnosis to survivorship and beyond. We use evidence-based holistic care at no cost, particularly geared toward those here in the DMV area, but they do not have to be treated here at the Innovashar Cancer System. Our mission is to enhance the quality of life for those affected by cancer by providing that evidence-based care through various education programs such as this, support and wellness programs, integrative therapies, etc. As you can see here, we have a multidisciplinary team of therapists, nurse navigators, dietitians, yoga therapists, so on and so forth. And so excited and thrilled to be able to offer that type of support to our community. We also offer several support groups and programming for sexual health. In addition to this series, we also offer a women's sexual health support group called Get Your Groove Back. We have pelvic floor health movement classes with our wonderful Sayde here, as well as other programs throughout the year. We also have at Innovashar Cancer, the specialty shop, providing products for those who have been diagnosed or going through treatments or post-treatment for cancer to support various components of psychosocial health, including things such as lubricants, dilators, moisturizers, etc. So if you do get treatment here or you're local to the Innovashar Cancer community, we would recommend or highlight that the shop exists and encourage you to take a look if you're interested. A few logistics for you here tonight. All questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. If you have them, please feel free to submit them at any point in time during the presentation. Just know that we'll circle back to them once Sayde is done talking with us. We do ask you use the Q&A feature for those questions and use the chat feature to connect with one another, share your experiences, see that you're not alone here in this community. We're so excited to be able to share this space and allow you to be here with us for that. And then if you're able, we ask you to rename yourself and whomever is attending with you if you're not alone, just to allow us to keep track of who's here and who's joining us from our registration list. Lastly, we do just want to note that this information is for informational and educational purposes only. If you have specific questions to your particular health or concerns with pelvic floor health in this context of this presentation, we do encourage you to talk to your healthcare providers. I'm going to stop sharing here and introduce our wonderful speaker. We are so excited to have her here with us. I welcome Sayde Alexandrescu. She's an accomplished wellness professional and educator with over 20 years of experience in corporate and community settings. Sayde has a really rich background in exercise physiology, in yoga therapy, and wellness program development. She's completed her Master's of Science in Exercise Science at Aurora University and holds a Master's of Science in Yoga Therapy from Maryland University of Integrative Health. She is a board certified ACSM CEP, which is a clinical exercise physiologist and a yoga therapist. Sayde, we could not be more excited to have you here. to talk to us about pelvic floor health and yoga therapy. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And aren't we lucky it was remote anyway, right? Nobody wanted to get out tonight. So thank you, Lauren, for doing the work between grant and the programming and just making sure we can all get together. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Let's start by figuring out a little bit more what I even mean, right? So I have lots of letters after my name, and that's just to say I really like what I'm doing. And I just want to share with you as much as I can. Yeah, but you shouldn't be, you should be, I don't know, intimidated by any of that. So, Sayde, you can find some of this information at my webpage, soundnesswithsadie.com. And as she mentioned, February and March, we'll be starting new sessions through Life with Cancer programming series Thursdays at noon. So register with Kirsty Pomeranski or register just through the calendar online and I'll get to see you there. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions or concerns. This is not the sort of stuff we learn in an hour. This is not even the sort of stuff we learn in the 1 month that I run the programming. And so you'll see people who just keep repeating sessions until they get it down. For actual pelvic floor movement, it's good to feel supported and to be able to do the movement in a way where you're actually able to relax the pelvic floor as well. So we're going to do some movement toward the end here. So if you want to get yourself set up for it, we work to bring the earth, or maybe you're on a couch or a bed or the floor. We're working to bring that up to you, right? So that your pelvic floor feels held and supported. So it might take stuff. And here's a sort of stuff I have. I have a big bolster. It's a pillow with a pillowcase on it, essentially, a bolster with a pillowcase on it. But maybe you just grab a couple pillows off of the bed or throw pillows off of the couch. These yoga blocks are ones I'll demonstrate with. At home, I honestly do just sort of fold up throw pillows. I usually have 2 blankets or maybe 3 beach towels. You can even use hand towels just to support things like your neck, right? To get just a roll underneath into our natural curves. So those are some of the things that you would want to use. And the truth is, even though you're supposedly looking at this screen, right? The truth is it's a lot more comfortable to set your own space so that you can be looking out toward some visual focus, out the window or your favorite photo or painting or a good colored wall or ceiling. And maybe you have a good smell or some background music set for yourself as well. You'll want to monitor yourself during what seems like simple movement. The truth is that it's kind of almost like a massage. If you ever go to massage therapy and they're like, drink a lot of water, we're moving stuff around at a cellular level. And just pay attention if you actually have changes in sensation. You may. And as you do, be mindful, stop as you need to, and know where your number for your contact for your medical team is if you need to contact them. So see if I can get this. No, that won't work. Okay. So movement, how much and why? ACSM and now the CDC has joined with the ACSM in recommendations for movement. It's 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity activity. Here's the trouble. There are 2 sides to this, right? So the 150 minutes is your aerobic work that I swept, that I went for a walk. Some of us aren't walking well. So maybe we're cycling or we're even doing bicycles on our back at home in our bed. Maybe it's the mere action of getting up and down out of bed, but then we add 15 times every time we do get on and off the toilet or our bed or whatever, right? And so it's getting toward that target heart rate, which is something that we could discuss separately, or you can discuss with your medical team. But finding a target heart rate, essentially, you just maybe start to feel warm on the back of your neck, right? Just start to breathe so that you have to pause to take breaths, but not that you can't talk while you're exercising. So in order to get 150 minutes, it's usually 30 minutes a day, right? Or if you get up to an intense exercise, you can do that 75 minutes twice a week and keep your heart equally healthy. So 2 times a week, though, you want to do other stuff that helps you to strengthen, right? Stuff that reaches you at a musculoskeletal, but it also therefore stabilizes our joints and squeezes out any stagnation in our lymph system. So strengthening activities 2 or more days a week that challenge your muscles, things that challenge your muscles, right? And sometimes these things can coincide because sweeping can very much challenge our muscles, right? Doing some stretching can challenge our muscles. If you're doing yoga with deep breath, well, then you're actually creating an aerobic activity and so on. So making sure that even on days where, even on weeks where we're receiving treatment, even on weeks where we're in recovery, quote unquote, but we know we don't feel the same, where we're deconditioned, we're still exhausted, that movement is even more important. Why? Well, physical activity for cancer survivors leads to improvements in their current life, but it also leads to increases in survival and success rates long term. In the short term, improved sleep is the obvious one. Preventing high levels of blood levels of insulin. So, right, so being able to intake your nutrients from your food and manage your endocrine system a little healthier. So many studies have been done with decreased anxiety, and that would just be self-reported. That's not anything that's that easy to register from the outside, unless you're looking at things like blood pressure and the heart health, which do give us evidence of that as well. But especially that self-reported anxiety, as well as QOLs, what we say is quality of life. Increased quality of life. Why? Well, because I can get up and down a little better, because I can provide myself with more independent care, right? Self-care. Bone strength comes with both forms of exercise, reducing inflammation and increasing our immunity markers, rebuilding that immune system sometimes when it has to be cooked, right, in order to get us to health. And improve body composition. The interesting thing is it won't necessarily say and you'll immediately be thinner, but you certainly will look better and things will fit better because there'll be muscle mass, even if there's some insulation on the outside, which we all have developed, I think, in this little cold spell. So what are we doing with our pelvic floor? Well, at its best, a healthy pelvic floor can relax. And there are half of you going, yeah, okay. And then the other half of you going, do you mean like relax? Like I could breathe in and everything can soften? Yeah, like that. At its best, a healthy pelvic floor, even one that has been injured, can relax. It can contract voluntarily, as I asked it to, or involuntarily, just without even thinking about it, to respond to our changes. And what are our changes? Well, intra-abdominal, meaning inside your abdominal wall, from your rib cage to the bottom of your bottom. And intrathoracic, meaning inside that thoracic cavity, which is from your collarbone to the bottom of your ribs. Both of those areas change with absolutely every breath we take. Okay, so that's like 30 to 40 times a minute or less or more, depending upon how much we're moving. So it'll change based on our load demands, that voluntary need to carry something, and being breathed, which is that involuntary means of us just stretching out our torso and contracting it a little bit every time we breathe. At its best, a healthy pelvic floor will move in timing with the breath cycle without our need to willingly control its movement. So this is what we're going to start with. We're going to start with a relaxation exercise. This is a hammock, right? Maybe this works for some of us. Maybe we're like, as soon as we see it. And notice the important thing is that the hammock is tethered, right? And maybe even we could pretend that instead of just tethered to one tree, it would be tethered to the front and back here and the front and back on the other side. Maybe there are 4 trees to really hold a grand hammock. For some of us, maybe it's a spider web that we first come to and we visualize and think, yeah, that can hold me. But it's a spider web in like a fence post corner or a door jamb. It's one that's being held on both sides as well, right? That's been spun and stuck to and tethered to the fence posts or the door jamb. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working with here as we allow ourselves to find some space, for peace, for calmness, and for relaxation. Why? Well, because our pelvic floor doesn't just respond to sort of physical demands that we have. Our pelvic floor also responds to psycho-emotional demands and the stresses that you've been experiencing through treatment or beyond it, right? And maybe some stress or trauma that you had before that can lead to tension in your pelvic floor. So there are a couple things we can do. We can either lay down in a position that's called constructive rest, or we can sit way up. If we're in our chair, we're going to sit up with our head back. Maybe we're going to scoot the chair back against the wall. You can scoot against the wall. whatever we do, we're going to want to realize that with each breath in, we want to try to find our pelvic floor. Okay, which is, like I said, it's sort of a hammock or a spider web that's catching everything. And it's down at the base of our torso. Well, before I was talking about from the bottom of your ribs to the bottom of your bottom, the pelvic floor is actually somewhere just above the bottom of your bottom, right? And as you breathe in, it's stretched because I'm filling my lungs, I'm stretching my belly. And as you breathe out, it empties, and I want some strength to help do that. So again, whether you're seated in a position, and gosh, maybe I'm going to cover up my feet again. I can throw my blanket around me. Maybe I want to put some supports underneath my arms because my shoulders get tired. Maybe I want supports under my knees. Maybe I'm going to fall into a constructive rest position. Even if you're lying, can you do it with a little bend in your knees? Sometimes I have a picture where you can throw your legs up on a chair, which feels great. Maybe I'll just have them over a bolster for now, but I descend into the earth, and then I've got to tuck my shoulder blades under, relax my neck. And the truth is, for a lot of us, after working on computers and being on phones so much, we try to lay our head back and our chin juts up a little bit, right? Or it tucks way in. Somewhere in between is the natural curve of our neck. So again, you can use a hand towel or just the end of a blanket to create a little roll for your neck, okay? And as I try to extend my arms, if they don't lie flat, well, what if I put some supports under my wrists so that it draws, again, just like with the little bend in the knees, and I could hinge my hips. I'm going to support my wrists, and then my arms can fall back into socket. And we breathe in. Most of us will be able to close our eyes for this guided visualization. Some of us feel safer with our eyes open, but find a comfortable resting pose here. To create that permission for breath. Just when you thought you were done with your breath in, breathe into the bones of your hips, to the stretch of your skin on your low belly. And breathe out. Can you relax? As we tune into what pelvic floor health means for us. Pelvic floor health aims to balance the muscles and the bones, the connective tissues, all of the alignment that supports our movement, our function, our breath. The pelvic floor supports your bladder, your bowel and colon, your sexual organs, and it's shaped like a hammock or a spider's web. Which one works for your visualization? As you close your eyes and take a deep breath in, can you breathe all the way to the hammock or the spider web? As you breathe in, you are held. And as you breathe out, you remember that even as you breathe out, even as the wind comes through this hammock or spider web, that it is tethered. It is anchored to the hip bones, the pubic bone, the tailbone. Our hammock or our spider's web physically holds us, catches us based on our alignment or our age or injury or surgery, the side effects from medications. But the pelvic floor also holds our emotions, our mind. So as you exhale, can you actually relax your pelvis? Can you actually empty your belly, empty your ribs, empty your collarbone? Because a nervous system that was developed during a time stress, real lack of security or safety at some point, holds on. Sometimes it creates a overactive or hypervigilant state of fear, worry, sadness, anger, self-doubt that forgets to turn off even during calmer times. So as you breathe in, promise yourself this breath of calmness. And as you breathe out, Allow full health to return. Pelvic floor health follows a relaxation response, follows a return to a relaxation response that must be achieved for full health. Misalignment, well, that inhibits our full breath capacity, our proper breathing. We need more than our lungs and what we think of at the bottom of our ribs as our diaphragm. We need more than just those two for breath. It is our pelvic floor that guides our full breath capacity as well. So what's the fix to recreating a relaxation response? More breath. Beginning with gentle movement with that breath, less sitting, and knowing where the foundation of that breath is, finding our perineum. So let's work on that together. As you take another deep breath in, can you make it to a 3 or 4 count breath in? And as you breathe out, can you make it to even longer? As we eventually come into a seat that's either on the front of a chair, right? The lighting is off a bit here. It's either on the front of a chair or a stack of pillows or blankets, or it's on the floor. We're going to try to find that sense of center. All right, so the easiest way to find it is find the yoke of your pants. So the yoke of your pants. So I've got a little triangle on mine. And can the yoke of your pants then, instead of facing the camera, which is common with all the sitting we do in modern society, can it face the ground? Well, mine's going to do that with a little support here, right? If I try to just sit up, and I've got a little tension in my low back or my shoulders, I want to actually create a little permission to fall forward off of what in this case is a bolster. It could be a folded up blanket. And then I've got a natural curve in my low back. Let's see if I can warm up enough to take this off. A natural curve in my neck and the yoke of my pants facing downward. I'm going to take a great big breath in. But as I take a breath out, I'm actually going to release here. And again, maybe I've got some pillows underneath my knees or folded up blankets, towels. Maybe I'm just in bed and I can sit back against the wall. Yeah, use the support behind you for your head to be, your heart to be open and your breath to be full. By the end of class, we're going to try to find the perineum down at the center, at the base of our torso. But for now, let's try to find the top of our pelvis. So I've got some hip bones here. You got yours? Go grab it. We're going to pretend that the hip bones are the top of a soup bowl. They're holding the soup, and we're going to spill our soup, okay? So start with whatever direction you want to, but try to spill your soup. The other thing that's hard that I want you, especially if you go to rewatch this, which I hope you do, or if you can join the session, it's the United States, and we don't talk much about pelvises. We certainly don't, spend time staring at them. But so this is my instructive pelvis, okay? And I'm showing you at its finest, right after the holidays and some sharp cold weather, right? So I've got a pubic bone and a tailbone, and it's really fun when you get to know people. You'll realize some people have tailbones that start high, some people have tailbones that start low, some are these tiny little triangles and others are bigger. So pubic bone, tailbone, hip, and hip. But we think of this as our sitting area. Can we start to isolate some movement in it? Okay. And so don't feel nervous. Use my, especially for those of us who are visual, use my pelvis as an instructional piece and know that I understand it's not what we're used to here. And then I want you to try to start spilling the soup forward and backwards. So speaking of the yoke of the pants, now we're going to face the camera with the yoke of the pants and then pretend we can face backward with the yoke of our pants. When we're all grown up, it's not I'm a little teapot with our head moving a lot, right? It's just these hip bones, which therefore then start to move some of the muscles in my low back and muscles of my abdomen and muscles on the inside and outside of my hips, right? How hard is this? For some of us, this is the hardest. This or the pelvic clock are actually the hardest things that engage our movement, right? So spilling the soup. That's one kind of warm up you can do, or an actual exercise. You can start to time yourself and connect your breath a little better with your movement as you do that. Another is finding the lines of exit from our body. So we'll work into that a little bit together, and then we'll do another sort of breathing exercise, less visualization and more actually the anatomy of our breath. And we'll learn what I mean when I keep saying to inhale and exhale. So, I'm gonna move myself here. So again, whichever worked for you, whether you were the hammock or the spider web, realizing that as weight goes on these things, as we take a deep breath in, as we stand up and are trying to hold something, whether it's just our own body standing up or we grab a mug or a cat food bag or kitty litter or ice melt, right? We start to move, these things can catch, right? A hammock loves nothing more than the weight of a person on it, and it stretches out a little more, remembering that it's tethered. Spider web can catch a fly, the spider can walk all over, and it's nothing but interconnectivity. Oh, and so this is you'll have this in your slides here, some images of ideas of how to create a constructive rest position for breathing. So this is just this cutaway, a real sort of sliver of it, obviously, right? But imagine this is your pubic bone in the front and your tailbone in the back, but imagine you have those hip bones as well. And that spider web or that hammock are connected all the way across, right? So if you have male-born anatomy or female-born anatomy for most of us here, but both are available. The interesting thing to notice is that the women's is a little wider. It also, you have to think about the fact that it gets punctured 3 times. So here it is. I've given you all these great ideas about how it just holds and tethers and supports us, except that we've punched a couple holes in it, and three then for biological women. Here we are with our urethra poked right through, and we have to somehow suspend this balloon of a bladder above it. We've got our uterus, which for whatever reason, anatomy said we should back it up into the bowel and let it hang out over the bladder, and then it's going to just be perfect for the whole rest of our lives. It will not complicate any prolapses or any sagging organs, right? And that the cervix is supposed to have a straight shot, straight out through the vaginal opening. And then our bowel, well, we put a big S curve. There's a little tiny one for men, but for women, we put a great big S curve at the end. And then we tell it to straighten out. And all that's to say, we do want to create these straight lines of exit. When our pelvic floor is at its best, we can have straight lines of exit. And where are those lines of exit coming? Well, we're looking for them to be pointing straight down to the ground if we're sitting, or if we lie on our back, then straight out to the baseboard. And we're looking for our perineum. Okay, so central tendon, this is called the deep traverse perineal muscle, right, that goes side to side. But the truth is there's a space for biological women, it'll be in front of the anal opening and behind the vaginal opening, this white part, right? So it's a tendon. And for those of us who have had chemo or surgery, it might look or feel a little bit differently. It might have gotten shortened, it might have gotten tightened, right? So how do we reconnect to the movement in this area? Urethral opening, so I'm not holding urine. I'm not stopping my urine flow or holding that. I'm not holding bowel or gas, but in that space in between. If you touch it, it's sort of the wrinkly skin on the outside, because it has to be flexible enough for any of those openings to open in, for it to be able to support the sphincters to close back up. That's what we're going to work with for the rest of class, okay? Yeah, so actually let's do that. There was one other thing. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go work on our full breath. So in doing that, again, whether we want to be seated or lying, we're trying to recognize that there's a wave, just like the wavelength of light that travels all the way to us from the center of the sun, the wavelength of sound that can travel. If you get a lion's roar, it'll go 50 miles, right? a lot of our life force travels on these wavelengths. And so we're going to recreate that with our breath, right? So it's under our collarbone. Our shoulders don't have to do this, but how many of us get nervous and do that? What if you just breathed into the width of your collarbone and use the actual breath capacity, not the fake muscles, fake breathing muscles in our neck, right? Because there aren't really any breathing capacity in our neck. And what if we start to breathe into our ribs? How many of them can you get, right? And then our belly, and then into our pelvis. So again, I'll demonstrate in that constructive rest, lying on my back. You're welcome to just be seated right now. And if you are, again, sit back against something, which might mean you're seated on a cushion. It might mean, like I said, you grab one of those towels or blankets just to give yourself the natural curve in your neck so your head can actually rest back, okay? And supports maybe under our knees, maybe your legs are straight as you care to, okay? That's a matter of comfort. A lot of us can't sit because we've got damage. A lot of us can't lay down because our low back will have none of it. So the last option would be that either you're kind of leaning over a counter so that you can use your whole torso breath capacity that way. Or one of my regular clients after colorectal cancer, it's laying on an ottoman. So the same idea of where is my perineum? Well, for those of us on the ground, it's kind of by the baseboard. If you're lying on an ottoman, it's about thigh length up the wall, right? Okay, so creating that permission to surrender as we find our 4-part breath. Why? Wasn't this called movement, right? Wasn't this called pelvic floor movement? So 2 reasons. 1, adding breath to any movement makes it aerobic, which leads to cardiovascular health. And as much good medicine, life-saving medicine, good is maybe a strange word, but life-saving medicine gets coursing through that blood. We want the blood to continue to course a little better and then eventually a little cleaner. And 2, as I mentioned, unless we fall into a relaxation response, the movement we're doing will be overstimulating. Not only will it keep us from achieving a full pelvic floor health and breath capacity and so on, it keeps us in bad patterns of alignment. And so then nobody wants to do the movement because we hurt, because we're achy, because something's rubbing. We've got a grind in a misaligned joint or whatever it is. All right, so how does it work? Still, if you can, this is way too much if it's your first introduction of this, but if you can, still visualizing from hip bone to pubic bone to tailbone, that spider web, that hammock, that trampoline is what some people will visualize holding through inhale and breathing all the way to it. How do we get there? Well, it's a 4-part wave that we build. So as we inhale, some of us will take our hands up, fingertips just over our shoulders so that we have a tactile permission to breathe. Again, not with a heave-ho of your shoulders, but a breath into the width of your collarbone. Can you close your eyes? And as you exhale, can you actually let go of all the air out of your collarbone? Breathe into your collarbone in its whole width. Can you breathe into the right and left side evenly? And hear your exhale. It doesn't take very long to breathe into your collarbone. Breathe in, your collarbone widens, breathe out, release completely. And we start to build that wave by breathing into your ribs. So I'm going to reach my thumbs under. My fingers are going to grab as many ribs as I can. So higher than my waist. Some of us, our wrists won't do that. So maybe we just kind of push our knuckles or squeeze the side of our arms onto our sides of our body. All of this can be done no matter what age or ability we're at right now. And we inhale with some hopefully tactile guide, but without is okay as well, filling those ribs. When we exhale out of our ribs, and maybe we even use our hands or arms to help squeeze. Why? Well, because in between each set of ribs, there's a muscle. We don't use it very well as we get older unless we swim or breathe correctly when we run, which is hard, or sleep on our side. We don't utilize these muscles well enough. So as we inhale, cue breath from collarbone to ribs, and use your hands to help the ribs move toward each other and push the air out. Okay, loosen your grip, loosen your wrists and your jaw, your ankles and toes, and inhale from collarbone to ribs. And exhale out of your ribs, maybe helping with a squeeze, and out of your collarbone completely. And then our hands come down to our belly. So first our thumbs are going to point at what we call the diaphragm, right? That breathing diaphragm is actually a thoracic diaphragm, just to be boring. And then our fingers are going to fall down by our belly button. And as we inhale, we're going to fill our belly. And then as you exhale, without squeezing your butt, tightening your thighs, pinching at your hips, can you just exhale your navel down towards your spine? All right, so where's that spider web or that hammock connected inside those bones? Can I inhale? My belly full, the spider web, the hammock soft, relaxed, taking the weight of my organs as I breathe them toward it. And as you exhale, can you engage that hammock or spider web to catch in your navel towards your spine without changing the direction of your pelvis? We'll get into that again more, but let's breathe. Building the wave from collarbone to ribs to belly. And breathing out of your belly and out of your ribs and out of your collarbone completely. And that's sort of a yoga 101. Well, you guys are beyond that. You guys need the advanced stuff. So let's take our fingers down into our hip creases where our thighs and our torso meet. Pinky fingers into your hip creases, thumbs point up towards your belly button. And here's our pelvis. Our hands naturally sort of make a triangle, right? From hip bone to pubic bone, the shape of your tailbone behind us, right? Do your hands help to cue you to breathe even lower? Then can you exhale out of your pelvis first, then your belly, then your ribs, and then your collarbone completely. And you fill this wave, collarbone to ribs, to belly, to pelvis. And breathe out completely from pelvis to belly, to ribs, to collarbone. All right, let's put some stuff together now. Can you loosen up? Some of us, even if we can lay on our back, quote unquote, we're getting a little stiff. So let's swing. Let's swing our hips side to side. And then let's swing from our tailbone to our pubic bone. Some of us are going to just take our knees to our chest if we feel a little tight. Maybe you have to straighten our legs up or straighten them out in front of us, right? Or maybe it's called windshield wipers. Maybe you take your feet wider than your hips and let them start to wave a little side to side. And then in the space that we were looking at in those anatomical slides, somewhere in there, we've got a perineum, right? All right, so whether you want to come up into a seat again, if you're uncomfortable on your back, or whether you can stay here another moment, keep your knees bent at this point for everybody, whether they're slightly bent if you're seated or really bent if you're on your back. And I want you to breathe in again, visualizing that trampoline or spider web or hammock catching your breath. And I want you to think about, okay, I'm not holding my urine, stopping my urine flow. I'm not holding my bowel or my gas. Okay, somewhere in between. Now, for me, I have a hitch in my giddy up on the right-hand side. So if I don't think about it, oftentimes my center is trying to point somewhere inside this knee. What if I actually straighten out? Okay, maybe I have to wiggle a little more. All right, there are 3 corners to my tailbone. Get them on the ground. There's a natural curve of my low back, which might be better supported by adding another blanket or towel or rolled up towel just for that little curve, right? Something to take pressure off if you need to. And then I'm going to push on my thighs. Oh, push your fingertips on your thighs. Does that help you to release? It's called the psoas muscle, release a little connected tension. Now I'm going to breathe in and see if I can get the center of my pelvic floor, that perineum, that white tendon piece. I'm going to get the center of it to face the baseboard. If I'm seated, I'm going to get it to face straight underneath me. And then as I exhale, I'm going to engage just the muscles around that little white part. Again, I'm not holding my bowel or colon or gas. I'm not holding a urine flow right in between. I'm going to engage just enough to follow the air out of my pelvis, belly, ribs, and collarbone. And then I'm going to fill in that rib, 4-part breath. I fill in that wave with your 4-part breath. And empty. Do you notice how one hip wants to kind of help push the air out more than the other? Or one thigh gets a little tighter, or one side, your toes tense up. Isn't that interesting how our body will compensate for misalignments or weaknesses? And it'll be even more interesting tomorrow when there are those of us who realize we're a little sore just from this breathing and simple movement. I'm going to take my knees to my chest before I come into a seat. You guys take your time. The easiest way to come up is to lie on your side, and you're going to keep your knees bent to start with, but you're going to use that top leg as a lever, right, for leverage. So I'm going to use both hands in front of my chest and straighten through my leg, straighten through my arms at the same time. And as I drop my foot, it helps me to roll onto my hip. So that's a little trick that I like to use. But finding your own way into your seat. So breath is hopefully guiding your movement, and hopefully movement is starting to take on a new meaning. As we realize the importance of these micro movements, right? And these micro muscles and ligaments, connective tissues. All right. So we're working to relieve some imbalances. Where do these imbalances come from? Why do we lack pelvic floor health at some point? Well, it could be postural habits. How many of us are in kind of this position a lot for driving or typing or screens? And we could have had that before any fatigue and other postural changes, right, related to our treatments. Cultural habits and norms. Ex-dancers and military sometimes can be have the hardest time with pelvic floor health because they've been told to hold themselves tall to the point that they just sort of lock or jam themselves into a postural place that isn't necessarily supported anymore, right? Instruction from authorities, we get nervous or tense. Again, that's stuff we can hold on to at the base of our pelvic floor. Our emotional issues can be held there. Hips are a ball and socket joint. They'll hold stuff in all directions. Improper breathing patterns. Maybe you're asthmatic or have allergies. Maybe you've been somewhere where the air is poor, or just stress, right? Anxiety, tension. Poor bladder habits, the teachers, this is where they come in. There are other people as well, right? The people who work in the factory and such. But holding it when we shouldn't be holding it, and forcing ourselves to use the bathroom just because we know it's our only break that we'll have. A fear of leakage or prolapse, for those who've had leakage or prolapse, you get real nervous about that. And when you get nervous about your fear or your prolapse, you hold on a little tighter, right? So it's an interesting one that it can lead to some imbalances. Pain, oh my gosh. And pain can be from a whole bunch of reasons. Surgeries, treatments, medications. And none of this is to diagnose, and none of this is to blame. Oh gosh, that's the first thing that comes. We start blaming. Why is this list here? Because I want you to recognize what you can work on and what is out of your control. What do I have control over? What do I not have control over? Okay, I'll get to the chat here in just a sec. So a lack of pelvic floor health can be sort of, in relation to the previous slide, it can be caused by or the result of. So what happened? Did I have some lumbar spinal issues, some sacroiliac hip knee imbalances, and then my pelvic floor was, that hammock wasn't able to be held by being tethered on both sides properly, and so it started getting tighter or shorter or cramped up on one side. Is that why? Or did your pelvic floor start to go and the knee or the hip or the SI joints or the lower back said, I better come in and help, right? Was it bladder weakness with urinary urgency or frequency? Or was it damage to the area, damage to the pelvic floor that then led to the bladder weakness or urinary urgency or frequency, right? Incontinence, whether we have leaking anal leakage or urinary leakage, right? And as I said, and then once that happens, our brain says, oh, I better try not to have a leak now. And we tighten up even more. That relaxation, that softness on our pelvic floor is something that we don't give ourselves a lot of permission for in public. Prolapses, bladder, bowel, or uterus rather, they can fall forward or backward or try and fall their way down and out. They can fall sideways. They can fall into other organs, right? Prolapses can come in any shape, lots of shapes and forms. Any sexual difficulties, again, they can be caused by pelvic issues or they can be the result of pelvic issues. Same with traumas, right? And when we're trying to address pelvic issues, and 25% of women experience, 25% of biological women experience some sort of violence related to sex, whether it's abuse or simple abuse or actual, whatever the word I'm looking for is. So, since 25% of us actually experience real trauma, trying to heal this area becomes problematic because it brings up some of that stuff. Menstrual imbalances or difficulties, again, result of or caused by, doesn't matter. At some point, it's just recognizing what's happening to you because this area as well, I showed you a couple of images. Those images have layers and layers of diagonal and forward and back and up and down and cross-sectioned connections that a physician can't see. And because that area is so sensitive, because they've had results from scar tissuing and stuff that actually is almost as damaging as the problems in the first place, even if you go in for surgery most times now, it's laparoscopic. So they can't exactly see. So this is just for you to start exploring and becoming aware of what's happening to you. Digestive problems, why? Well, I showed you that image, right? How much space do you have between your vaginal opening and your colon? Your anal opening, not that much. It's just some wrinkly skin on the outside, right? So the second that you have some inflammation in your digestive system, especially in this lower bowel, well, that's adding some pressure, isn't it? Well, that pushes our pelvic floor. It pushes, our bladder forward or our cervical opening back or our tailbone has to move or whatever, right? So whether it's constipation, diarrhea, IBS, these are all very common symptoms that people who are experiencing a lack of pelvic floor health can see. All right, so this is it, guys. This is everything in yoga therapy. So next week or 2 weeks, whenever the next session, you guys get to meet with the pelvic floor health PT, and they have absolutely revolutionized the return of health for a lot of people. There's still a little bit of difference between myself as an exercise physiologist and yoga therapist and a physical therapist in that a physical therapist is going to say, use it until you exhaust it. Let's get it to, and there is something to the DNA really wanting to go back to where it came from. So they say, use it and use it and use it, and then it'll work. My personal experience, actually, as well as experience with clients, is that if I'm trying to use an area, right, if this circle, this clock, which will make sense here in a second, but let's say this circle of my pelvic floor, not really circle, but let's pretend, right? This spider web, this trampoline of a pelvic floor. If I want to use it, but the only areas that are actually working are just kind of one side. So I'm going to use that and use that and use that and use that and use that. And all of a sudden I have cranked myself into a misalignment that is affecting my entire stance, let alone my ability to hold those exit lines, right? To hold these lines of exit straight. And if I don't, then what happens? You want to hear a funny thing? This is to make us all feel better, but for those who are experiencing urinary incontinence, any leakage here. So for people, I don't know why 74 was the magic number, but people at the age of 74, it is 75% of men and women age 74 or older who experience some sort of urinary incontinence. And it can be possibly for some of the things that I'm saying here, this sort of lack of alignment. For professional female athletes between the ages of 18 and 24, it is also 75% who have urinary incontinence. What? Wait, what? Why? Why are we letting people just pee themselves? Right? Well, for some of us, we can't, that, you know, it's uncontrollable and that part's okay. But if there's a part that we can fix and control, it's got to be in alignment. Okay. So we'll talk more about that in a second, but this is the money right here. This is all that I care about. Let's put it toward the bottom. 12 o'clock is your pubic bone. 6 o'clock is your tailbone. Okay. 12 o'clock is your pubic bone. 6 is your tailbone. 3 o'clock is your right hip. 9 o'clock is your left hip. And as we inhale, we're going to relax this whole clock. We're going to pretend that our pelvic floor is a circle. It's not exactly. It's, you know, we say the square of our hips, but the truth is our hips are more, there's more of a rectangle happening between those hips, right? We're going to give it a circular sort of feel. Okay. And we're going to pretend that we can get all these hours of the clock engaged with our breath. And as we inhale, this whole thing relaxes. Ooh, that's the hardest part for some of us. And we return our perineum to face the center of the clock. What's wrong with this clock though? There aren't any hands. So our next movement exploration will be to try and draw the hands on the clock from our perineum. Okay, so as we exhale, our pelvic floor, that perineum engages. And we're going to turn it toward the hour on the clock. It doesn't move that much. For some of us, it moves 1/4 of an inch. For some of us, maybe it moves 1.5 inches. And then eventually the goal is to get it, however much it moves, to get it to move the same. And what we'll find for some of us as we go to try and move through these hours of the clock is we've got a quadrant that doesn't work. We've got an hour of the clock that we can't talk to. And knowing how to support and re-engage that area before we just start doing the reps is paramount to success in the long run. So again, as it says over here, we're using the breath to guide our perineum to draw the hands on the clock. And then we just start to be curious and mindful of our shortest or our tightest hours. Okay. So when I know that you have started to relax, I can't, you know, luckily I can't hear and see all this, but I will, you will start passing gas, you will start yawning, or maybe you'll even fall asleep. Realizing that for all of us that this is new to, there's that nervousness about it, the ability to focus, I'm paying attention, but I'm a little nervous. Then can I start to practice these physical movements and still pass gas, yawn, fall asleep? Sure, then you've relaxed. Okay, so again, pubic bone. Where do I put you so you're out of the way? Pubic bone is at the top at 12 o'clock. And as we go in then to, by April, we'll have an intermediate, it's called the advanced, but intermediate pelvic floor health for those who know that they have some physical strengths, like they have some musculoskeletal strength right now, and yet they aren't able to control their pelvic floor the way that they would like to. Okay, so we'll get into that at intermediate by April. You have to have gone through this sort of basic one first. So pubic bone is 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock is your right hip, tailbone is 6 o'clock, left hip is 9 o'clock. I'll repeat that again, don't worry about that. But we inhale to get our perineum to face the center of this clock, which is either lying on from the baseboard up, right? Base of the floor up. If we're seated, it's just below our chair. And as we exhale, we're trying to draw the hands on the clock. Okay. And we'll come back to this. All right. Who's so excited? I'm so excited. I love sharing the pelvic clock because, as I said, it does help us to, oh yeah, and Lauren responded. The cool thing is when you register for this awesome, as I said, Lauren did an amazing job of getting the financial support for this workshop series. And when you're registered for this workshop series, there will be recordings available to you for all of the weeks. So yeah. Okay. So whether we want to sit, and in this case, maybe we have ourselves seated again against the wall. Some of our seated stuff as we get into more movement would be forward on our chair. Maybe we're lying, maybe we're on our ottoman. We're going to try to activate this pelvic clock, right? So if I'm sitting here, where's the clock? Where's the clock? It's down here on the ground, right here, right down here on the ground. So 12 o'clock is the front, right? Which is my pubic bone. 6 o'clock is my tailbone. 3 o'clock is my right hip. 9 o'clock is my left hip. If I'm on the ground, that shifts. And what becomes really cool is that that's going to shift in every movement that you start to do, and every exercise you're doing. If you're doing barbells and just standing there doing this, think about, where's the center of my perineum? Is it facing the center of my clock? Okay. So I'm going to lie back again, and maybe you're going to join me. And I'm going to create this permission to start to figure out what hours work, what hours don't work so much. They could work in different ways, right? We start just by thinking of those lines of exit. Okay, I've got an anal opening, I've got a urinary opening, I've got a vaginal opening, and they're all going to point. I'm lying on my back, so they're all going to point from the baseboard up, right? From where the floor meets the ceiling up. It's, about yay high. All of your hip bones are. We all are different sizes. Then I tuck my shoulder blades under and tuck my tailbone a little flatter to the ground, loosen my skull. Maybe I'm breathing in and out through my mouth. There's a reason if you need to do that, do it. Eventually, for 80, depends on the week, 80 or 90% of your yoga practice, you'll aim to breathe in and out through your nose, again, to trigger that relaxation response to move a little deeper into your body. And as I breathe in, from collarbone to ribs, belly to pelvis, I try and get my perineum to face the center of this imaginary clock that I've now placed with 12 o'clock, my pubic bone, 6 o'clock, my tailbone, 3 o'clock at my right hip, 9 o'clock at my left hip. Okay, if I need to shift a little more side to side, front to back, maybe top to bottom. So when I breathe in, my perineum is going to face the center of the clock. And when I breathe out, oh wait, here's this. When I breathe out, my perineum is going to face the center of the clock. How does that make sense? It might not for some of our bodies. For some of us, our butt wants to tighten, so our perineum starts facing up a little bit. Some of us, our hips want to engage and our perineum starts facing downward. Maybe our belly overdoes it, our perineum starts facing almost backward. Let's try to breathe in, relax the floor of your pelvis. Your perineum faces the center of this imaginary clock. And you breathe out. And again, you're not holding urine or bowel or gas, but you're engaging that little wrinkly spot in between to help you find the center of your clock. And as we inhale and relax our pelvic floor, we're going to pick something to draw the hands on the clock. What do you want? Do you want a marker? Do you want a paintbrush? Do you want a colored pencil? Anything, some sort of colorful or drawing sort of implement. And as we inhale, our perineum faces the center of the clock, relaxed. And as we exhale, our perineum is going to hold that writing implement, and we're going to use it to draw the hand up to 12 o'clock. And then as we inhale, can we come back to the center of the clock and relax? Drop the writing implement or the coloring implement. Exhale, engage just your perineum, just to draw the hand on the clock up to 12 o'clock. And you inhale to come back. If you're trying to stare at me on the screen, there isn't much to see. I apologize. Like I said, it's anywhere from a 1/4 inch to 1.5 inches of movement. It's not much. It's enough for you to know, okay, as I inhale, I've relaxed. Maybe I can even breathe not just my perineum at the center of the clock, but I can sort of breathe from hip to hip and pubic bone to tailbone. Then as I exhale, my perineum, not my anal opening or my vaginal opening or my urethral opening. My perineum is going to hold that implement to draw the hand down to 6 o'clock. Should we try 6 o'clock? Inhale to center and relax. Exhale, hold on. Draw the hand on the clock to point at 6 o'clock. Inhale to center and relax. If this makes no sense to you, fantastic. You're with half of us. Makes a little bit of sense to you, good. If it makes some sense to you, but you realize you don't have as much control as you thought, fantastic. That's why we're here together. Do you want to try and go side to side now? So again, it's not this letter U. And my perineum facing the center as I inhale. And as I exhale, I'm going to draw the hand on the clock to point at 3 o'clock. And then as I inhale, I'm going to come back to center and relax. Exhale to 9 o'clock. Good. Did your toes want to do it? Did your fingers or your jaw or the outside of this body want to do some of the work? What about just the stuff on the inside? Inhale, the perineum faces the center of the clock. Draw the hands on the clock, and eventually we do entire pelvic circles, which means that you'll draw 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock and so on. And then once you get to 12 o'clock, you'll go backward from 12 o'clock to 11 to 10, 9, and so on. So let's try. Let's try and move through this pelvic clock as we inhale at center. Perineum, all the hours of the clock, relax. Exhale, engage that perineum to hold and implement and draw toward the next hour. Inhale to relax. Exhale. Is your perineum able to point and shift its direction toward that hour of the clock? Or do you realize that maybe that hour of the clock just sort of tightens and drags your whole hips over? Isn't that interesting how different we can be at different areas of our pelvis? Explore, be curious. The second you start to feel frustrated, laugh and try to relax. This is not easy. And unless you had a surgery that was swift, most of us have spent months and years working up to these misalignments, these dysfunctions, and it'll take work to come back to functionality. What happens, as we already touched on, we start to quietly focus on our pelvis and breathe. And the truth is, we start to bubble a little. You get a little frustrated or angry or anxious or guilty or shameful or what comes up? Okay. The good news is you're home alone with your microphone on mute. Scream, cry, shout, whatever it is you need to do. But you do not need to hold on to damaged emotions, to negativity. You do not need to hold on to yesterday. All you are promised is this moment. Give yourself a soft breath in this moment. It is what you deserve. Continue around the clock, making it 12 o'clock, and then from 12 to 11 and so on, making it back. Pausing whenever you need to. If stuff gets achy, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. Eventually, you'll get the strength to be able to do this a little bit better, for a little bit longer, a little more breath capacity. I have a friend who had to leave early. She's in her treatment, and I'm glad she joined us at all. So thank you to Laura for coming. As we keep breathing, honest with ourselves. So that might be the best concentration point for you. I've given you hammock, spider web, trampoline. If that worked, stick with it. I've given you 4-part breath, building that wave. That works with you. For you, stick with it. And now I'm giving you the pelvic clock. Connect your breath with this movement. And if that's what works, use it. When you breathe into your low belly and your low back and you relax, do you feel like there's that exit line for your urethra and your colon? And as you exhale, can you engage your perineum with softness for the rest of your belly without recruiting our hips or our thighs or our toes or our ankles or our jaw or our fingers, our upper abdomen, just the perineum a little bit, maybe a little bit in your lower abdomen, bottom soft. Finding an increased range of motion over time, right? This takes a long time to build up. Then we get to do some big kid stuff. And this is the point at which we're going to do, how does this movement relate to a Kegel? Okay, similar, right? In that as we exhale, we're engaging that area. The difference is that I want you to recognize your ability to move in different directions in your pelvis, your ability to return to center. And when not, appreciating those areas that are a little flaccid or weak, that are a little bit mentally, maybe, or emotionally you're disconnected to, that are a little bit tight. They've worked so hard, they're holding on so tightly that we actually don't have any movement in that area because they've shortened because of their tightness. Or maybe they're long and tight and there's rigidity, there's not enough flexibility of motion. So related in that we're trying to activate the same area, and I'm sure you'll talk about a Kegel next week with a pelvic floor therapist. What I would like is for you to activate and find this area and recognize that if you have areas of the clock that don't work for whatever reason, I mentioned some tight, short, weak, blah, 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 that they all need to start being recruited together, all the hours of the clock moving toward the perineum at the same time in order for you to have a successful Kegel that doesn't lead to more misalignment or leakage in the future. Does that make sense? Okay, so some of this is going to be just demonstration for you to just see where we go in the pelvic floor health series that you guys could join me for Thursdays at noon. Some of this you'll be able to do with me. If it doesn't feel good, don't do it. As simple as that. We're not hurting ourselves today. Because again, if you're not in alignment, then it doesn't work. All right. So, but let's try. We're going to come into hands and knees for those of us who can. If your knees, move this. If your let's do this. If your forearms or wrists are cranky, you might roll up a blanket to support just your wrists, but your fingertips need to be able to grab onto something. Okay. You might take your forearms onto a pillow. We're going to try and aim for this tabletop position. If it doesn't feel good to you, though, you can rest here. You can have your forearms on a chair or a countertop. You could have yourself against the wall and be doing the same sort of motion from here. There's a little space between our knees, okay? That's the space for your tailbone to be reminded that it exists between your hips. As I said, we think of this area as a sitting area, but it's got so much going on, especially when we start using it again better. So I'm going to spread my fingers out. Oh, how's my shadow casting here? Oh, don't worry about popping in late. And the good news is there'll be a recording available to you, and at the end, I'll mention some classes coming up. All right, middle fingers parallel to your spine. Where's my left hip? Where's my right hip? Where's my tailbone? Where's my pubic bone? Okay, and then what's in between? Where is my perineum? My perineum is going to face straight behind me. So again, if it works for you, put that pelvic clock on the wall, not down at the baseboard now, but straight back from your hips. Oh, there it is. Hello. I've got 12 o'clock at my pubic bone, 6 o'clock at my tailbone, 3 o'clock at my right hip, 9 o'clock at my left hip. And as I inhale, I'm going to point my perineum up to the place where the wall meets the ceiling. So this is an inhale. It's a downward arc. I've given my belly more space to breathe in, right? And as I breathe out, I'm going to point my perineum somewhere behind my hips. Behind my knees, I'm sorry. Right? So that clock now is down on the floor. And this is my space to breathe out because I'm holding my spine up with the strength of my belly. So as I inhale, again, a lot of times when we learn this in kind of a yoga 101, we lift our tailbone or we tuck our tailbone. Okay, well, if I tuck my tailbone, what have I done? Have I just closed this whole area off? Have I underutilized my abdominal wall and shut off my perineum? What if instead I point my perineum down behind my knees? I use my hands and feet to take some weight. Good. Inhale. And now I breathe freely into my belly and I point my perineum up. Maybe I can breathe into my perineum. Maybe I can also breathe into my right hip and my left hip and my tailbone and my pubic bone. Good. Exhale. Press into your hands and feet as you point your perineum. down behind your knees. Now I'm not trying to drop my perineum. My perineum actually engages in towards center, maybe even into my torso a little, but the direction of it is behind my knees. And as I inhale, the direction of my perineum is up where the wall meets the ceiling. Is that a new way to look at a cat and dog roll? Is that kind of fun? Inhale, and for those of us who, again, who need to, we might have ourselves on the wall. So that's, I don't understand the clock motion, how to avoid doing a Kegel contraction. You can do a Kegel contraction if you know how to do it, but think about all the hours of the clock moving with you while you're doing it. How about that? So Kegel's fine, but am I doing a Kegel that engages at least 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, right? Or maybe I go kind of on a cross instead of a T, and I go from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock and 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock, right? Or can I think of all the hours of the clock and are they all coming in, right? That's kind of more of an advanced thing. So anyway, for those of you who didn't understand it, good, ignore it. You won't get hurt later. So another way to engage more movement, plank. A lot of us don't have the wrist to be doing this, but we could be doing it on our forearms. We could be doing it with our knees down. We could be doing it on a chair. We could be doing it on the wall. And actually, let me show you that one real quick. Getting close on time, but right, we could just, when we're not feeling physically fantastic, we can still get ourselves to the point where we are at the wall and just pushing ourselves out and holding ourselves and then bending in. We're letting our knees bend while we keep our arms straight. Knees bend and straighten. Okay. Because this is work in and of itself. If we know where our hips are pointing, right? So where the clock would be, creating that permission as I inhale, create that length through my hips. So I want the center of the clock to be between my knees. If I have my knees on the ground, that's fine. The center of the clock is between your knees. If you have your legs straight, also fine. There's a little space between my feet. Why? That's the space for me to be able to utilize my tailbone and my left hip and my right hip and my pubic bone separately. Okay? And to have space to engage my perineum. So maybe we hold it, maybe we exhale down and inhale extension. A lot of us really kind of want to lead with one side, right? So let's all try plank. Inhale, exhale. Can my knees return back at the same time? If not, that's just the symptom of your pelvic floor misalignment, and we'll work on it together to get it stronger, okay? So plank is another place that we can be utilizing movement, whether we go in and out of it, whether we hold it, creating that permission on that space. Some of us don't want to go straight to a plank. Some of us can hold for short periods of time. But the thing that might build us up to doing that a little bit better is bird dog, it's called, right? Hunting dogs. So as we inhale that permission, can you exhale and extend your leg? Second toe facing straight forward. Perineum facing where? Well, my hips are facing straight back, so the clock is straight back. Just like it was in that, started in that tabletop, it's facing about hip high behind us. And as I inhale, my whole pelvic floor softens. My perineum faces the center of the clock. And as I exhale, whether I'm bringing my knee in or starting to lift that leg, my perineum still faces between my ankles and straight back on that wall behind me. Yeah, as opposed to kind of wanting to face into that one ankle or knee because I'm dominant on one side. So exhale, knees together. Inhale, extending that straight leg. So there are 3 or so versions, levels to build up to. One is just, can I extend my leg on an inhale and exhale, bring it in. And here's our tendency, right? Kind of rock and shift. When we're all grown up, our pelvic floor will be stable, our hips will be strong. Inhale, straight back. Second toe grabbing onto the ground. Exhale. Or maybe you inhale and exhale without having to shift those hips too much. You can add your arms. It'd be the opposite arm and opposite leg. We start just like we're starting with our toe, second toe on the ground. We're starting with our pinky finger on the ground. Inhale, where's my perineum? Well, it wants to be here. What if I straightened out? Exhale together. Inhale, extension. Second toe, pinky finger, press down. Exhale together. And again, you can add some lifts, but it's not our head holding us. It's not our back holding us, right? Our perineum is in alignment with the rest of our spine. We exhale. And boy, that's the hardest part for a lot of us. It's with control that we float in. Bird dog, that's another way that we can use our pelvic floor health to get us into some movement. Forward bends would be another place. Warrior twos, clamshells are another traditional one. We're getting short on time, but let's try a different version of a relaxing pose together for another 10 seconds to breathe. It's called child's pose, and you might have that pillow or stack of blankets, the ottoman, and you find a way to rest your hips toward your heels and your belly toward your thighs and your hairline to something, your forehead to something. Maybe your hands are your pillow, you stack them up, you grab something for your head, but you soften over yourself. And as you breathe in, you feel the support of you breathing against you. And you breathe out completely. Can you breathe in from collarbone to ribs, to belly, to pelvis? Can you breathe out of your pelvis and your belly and your ribs and your collarbone? Completely building that wave and surrendering that wave. You start to pay more attention, to explore and be curious about where your pelvis is in space. Can that sound travel to your perineum? And as you rise up into your seat, as you find a way to face one another, we offer gratitude to ourselves and gratitude to those who practiced with us. We realize that we have maybe more questions even than when we began. This is a process, and I appreciate you going on this journey with me together. Be nice to yourself, start to explore, and the pelvic health function will start to return. I'm Sayde. Thank you so much for coming to play.